Okay, today we're going to create a simple login system using PHP. So a person would go to a website, they'd be asked for their username and password, they enter it in. If they're successful, they're taken to a success page. If they fail, they're taken to a failure page. And so to do this, we're going to want to make our PHP work with MySQL. And so I'm going to go ahead and open up the XAMPP control panel. You'll want to have already installed this. Go ahead and start the Apache server and start the MySQL server. Once they're green, we can take a look at our local host, and we want to go to the /XAMPP folder. So type in localhost /XAMPP, and I should get this welcoming window here. The first thing we want to do is set up the database. And so the tool that we can use to set up the database graphically is called Php Myadmin. It's a weird name, but it actually lets us control the MySQL database. So I'll click on that. And here we are at Php Myadmin, and I'm looking at my database structure, and I can see the different databases that my system has on it already. And what we want to do is we want to create a database to track our members, their usernames, and their passwords. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new database here by clicking New. And then as I do that, it wants to know the database name, and I'm going to call this members. It's case sensitive. I'm going to put it all lowercase. And then I get the coalition. I'm just going to leave that. That's how we sort the letters. And if you leave this by default, it'll sort in the same way that your computer is alphabetized. So just leave that the way it is. I'll go ahead and create this database. Now I've got a database called members. I can see it in my list here. If I click on it, it's empty. It has no tables found. So we want to create some tables in our database, and I'll create a new table called members. So I've got a database name members, and I'll have a table called members. A number of columns. I'll go ahead and put in, let me see, I want the ID, the first name, the last name, the password, and the email. So I'll put in 5 different columns there. Go ahead and click go. Okay, so I'm looking at how to create a table here. I've got the names of the different columns. So the first column is usually ID. I'm going to have this as an integer. Then I'll have first name, all one word, last name, all one word. I'll have the password, and then I'll have the email address. Okay, so that's the different names for my columns. The data types, we've got to change this. I do want my ID to be an integer. That's going to be a whole number, so it's going to start at 1 and count up. My first name, however, is not going to be an integer. My first name is going to be a veritable character, and that means it's a bunch of characters, A through Z, but it might also vary in length. So that stands for variable character, and I'm going to make that the same thing with the last name and the password and the email. For my length values, I can just going to say 250 on all of these characters. I'll leave the length value blank in the ID. With the default, I'll have none. The collation, I'll leave with the default. Attributes, so I'm not going to do anything with attributes. Don't have to worry about index or null, but I do want to have my ID auto increment. And so what that will do is that every time I add a new member to my database, it'll automatically get the next number, the next ID. So my first member will be number 1, ID number 1. My second member will be ID number 2, and so on. I can leave everything else blank, and I'll just leave the rest of this blank and hit save. Okay, so now I've got my members table here. If I expand on it and look at the columns, I can see that it's got email, first name, ID, last name, password. Now I'm just going to enter some data in there so I can work with it. And to do that, I've got this Insert tab over here. So this Insert tab, I click on that, and it allows me to put in 2 rows at one time. I can leave the ID blank because that's going to be auto increment. But I'll just put in my own name and put in some password. My password is going to be password5. How's that for secure? My email, let's see, sean.worthington@gmail.com. I could put in somebody else just for fun. Doofus, Dinkins, password 6, doofus@doofus.com. Okay, I'll go ahead and click go down here, and it says 2 rows inserted. Now if I click on the Browse tab here, I should be able to see the results of my table, and I see that there's 2 rows here, myself and Doofus. So I can use this now to access, I can use this to now hold my usernames and passwords for my login website. All right.